Welcome to the Messenger-Inquirer Gridiron Report, sponsored by Crandall's Home Furnishings and Carpets Unlimited. I'm Messenger-Inquirer sports editor Scott Hagerman, and with me is Messenger-Inquirer sports writer Jim Pickens. Jim, 6A, we're going to get right into it. It was all about the 6A this week. It was Marshall County coming into Apollo. And here's what I'm going to say about this game. I picked Apollo in this game more out of heart, more out of just wanting to see them do well than with my mind, because I said it on last week's show.
True.
I don't know how in the world I'm picking a team to win that's only scored one touchdown or two touchdowns in 12 quarters.
Right.
Well, we sat here a few days later. Now they've only scored 3 touchdowns in 16 quarters.
Yep.
Marshall comes in, beats them 23-7. Tell me what your thoughts are on Apollo, and can they turn it around, or is Apollo just what they are, which is not very good?
Well, Apollo is our, there's no question that they're the most disappointing team, I think, in our area this year, just based on their personnel, Scott. When you look down here, 4 first downs, 59 yards rushing, and this is a home game. I mean, Marshall County had to make the long trip, and this is a district game where the opponent's traveling a long distance, and they're not much better, if any, than you, and you've got to play better than losing 23-7. It's disappointing. They just can't get anything going. I mean, Elijah Dillard, 67-yard touchdown pass from Corbin Jewell. This team failed to fire, so to speak, against Marshall County. And the only thing, you're asking me about the future for Apollo this year. The only salvation here is that this district, other than Henderson County, is so weak that Apollo can fight their way back. I mean, there's some teams they can beat, and they may beat, but they've got to get something fixed on the offensive side, and they've been working on this for 2 or 3 weeks, obviously, because it's been a struggle all year, and so far nothing seems to have worked.
Well, we're not going to say their season's over by any means, because like you say, I would honestly say this is probably the weakest 6A district in the state.
Or America.
Or America very well could be true too. But when you really look at the numbers, if you take away the Dillard 67-yard touchdown reception, that means they threw for 22 yards. They're only rushing for 59 yards. Laster rushes for 25. Elijah Dillard 21 yards on 9 carries. 4 first downs. I mean, Paul Bates said in the season preview, and you'll remember me pointing this out to you, he said he felt like they had more playmakers on this year's team than they did last year, which surprised me. But it says that he thinks there's a ton of talent on this team.
Yes. So
how in the world, 5 games into the season, can your offense be this bad if you've got playmakers?
The only answer, that you're asking me a tactical question there. What's wrong? And here's what I would say is wrong. Must be. It must start with the line, because if you can't, we've talked about this, the greatest running backs in the game, if they don't have a hole to run through, where do they go?
Right.
And so I think that probably the breakdown of this team is probably an offensive line, Scott, that has not played up to par. I mean, maybe they're young in spots. They probably are. They lost some good linemen, I think, last year. But still, we're halfway through this season, and nothing is developing.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
We're halfway through the season. It's time to quit talking about we're going to make this adjustment or we're going to look at that. We're halfway through the season. I mean, at some point you just have to say, we're not a very good team.
Yeah.
And we're getting very close to that with Apollo.
Yeah, and I think that the biggest problem out there right now that's facing them is, have the wheels fallen off? I mean, we've talked about this mentally. I mean, where do we go from here? Is everybody still on the same page, or are people leaving the reservation, so to speak? And it'll be interesting to see how they respond this weekend, because there's a lot of interest coming up this weekend. Their season may be on the line this weekend, so we'll see how they respond.
Well, we got the other 6A matchup I want to talk about just briefly. There's not a whole lot to talk about in it. Henderson County goes to Daviess County. It's 52-7 Henderson. Mm-hmm. Marcus Kimbrell, DC coach, said Henderson handled us on the line more than anybody. And remember, they've already played Bowling Green and Owensboro.
That's right.
So Henderson, I think, with this performance, are without question the team to beat in this district.
Oh, there's no question about that. And I mean, I think we were all a little bit leery of Henderson in the sense that, they came in 2-2, and I know they'd lost to good people, but still, better Henderson teams would have been 3-1 or 4-0 maybe at that point. I will say this: I underestimated them. I will concede I underestimated them because I thought that this would be a more competitive game.
Yes.
I thought with Daviess County having come off a game, I know it was McLean, but they had some confidence where they had scored some points and scored some touchdowns through the air. But see, the problem is, let's get back to fundamental football here for a minute. The line, okay? Henderson County has the best line in this district by a country mile.
Right.
And when you have 531 yards of offense on the road
right.
against really an old kind of rival and everything, 364 yards rushing, that's as dominant a performance. I don't care who you're playing.
Right.
That's as dominant a performance as you're going to get.
Well, our other 6A team in action this week, and I think we have video of this, was Muhlenberg County going into Hawesville to play Hancock County. This was another situation where Muhlenberg comes in winless, desperate to show they can do something against the Hancock team that we both feel is pretty good.
Yes.
And Muhlenberg just couldn't get much done. Hancock leads 46-7 going into the fourth quarter. Muhlenberg gets a little done in the fourth quarter. It ends up a 53-27 Hancock win. I know the Hornets winning didn't surprise you. Did anything about the win surprise you, margin or anything
Well,
else?
I'll mention a couple of things that surprised me against Muhlenberg County. These types of stats. Eric Doyle, 8 carries, 105 yards. Chance Hamilton, 6 carries, 113 yards. Dylan Hubbard, 6 carries, 109 yards. My goodness, I mean, these kids are rushing for like 15 yards a carry. And then you look at Matt Rapp, we've talked about him, Scott. Boy, this is a good statistic for Hancock out of this game. And it's kind of an underrated, a little bit under the radar type of statistic because the rushing was so powerful with 404 yards. Matt Rapp, we've talked about the balance Hancock County needs, and I know it's Muhlenberg, and they're not the best defensive team in the world. Nonetheless, you still have to throw the ball and catch the ball. They were 7 for 9 through the air for 114 yards and 2 touchdowns, and that is exactly what they're going to need to challenge for the district championship, that type of balance.
Muhlenberg County offensively was not bad. Now, granted, they had 443 yards of total offense, and a lot of them came in the fourth quarter when Hancock was playing a lot of reserves. But even earlier in the game, for instance, their first drive, they moved down to the Hancock 7, and then it just fizzles out on them. Their second drive, they gained some yards. They have bright spots. I mean, David Hocker rushes for 111 yards on 23 carries, but it just seems like there's something that foils them every single possession at some point.
Yeah, the thing for the last 2 years with Muhlenberg, I think, is that this is a team that's moved the ball pretty well between the 20 and the 20, if you know what I'm saying. You know, I mean, they have their moments where they'll break a big play because they've got some kids out there who can make plays, but they don't finish very well, and that's a young program still. I mean, I'm not making excuses for them, but I'm just saying that this is a team, you know, still trying to put everything together, and you know, it looks like that they continue to play hard in this game because even though they wound up scoring 20 points, I think, in the fourth quarter, you still have to. There has to be some effort there. That's encouraging, really. I mean, it really is because I don't care who they're playing against. Somebody's trying to make a play, and they did make a few plays there in the fourth quarter and got on the scoreboard, and it helps to do that. I know they're winless and everything, but this is a very good Hancock team. They just weren't going to beat Hancock this year. This is one of those games where they weren't going to be very competitive with Hancock. And it's more of a reflection, I think, on Hancock than it is Muhlenberg County this year. Yeah.
Well, between David Hocker's rushing, Dalton Oliver looked good at times. He's got a real nice weapon in Lamont Gregory, a really big kid who, you know, really is a presence across the middle. They liked running that middle route. And,
tough to cover.
You know, and honestly, Hancock had issues with that I think they've got to really think about this week. Yeah. But the disappointing thing is you see all this in Muhlenberg, and then they're just not getting it done on the scoreboard, and that's the disappointing part. Well, we've got a lot more to talk about, but first we're going to take a break to hear a word from our sponsor.